welcome everybody. What we're going to talk about today is, in general, cloud in healthcare, but we're going to be talking about some very specific topics as well. And obviously, we're going to welcome as much participation as necessary, or as you're willing to give. I mean, we'd love to have a lot. So I wanted to start off first so that we can set the stage appropriately for our panelists and find out a little bit more about the audience, is how many of you have heard the term cloud? And where the heck have the rest of you been if you're not raising your hands? All right. Number two, how many of you believe that you are ready to either already in the cloud now or just making taking the steps forward to enter into a contract or doing vendor selection, et cetera? Either they're already, two or three. How many are moving, have already made selections and are looking to move now? And how many of you think the cloud is just BS, nobody's going to do it, it's a fad, and it will go away? What about, so there's got to be some, okay, so I think we got an idea now that some people know what's going on in general, but what we're going to talk about today is a lot of, hopefully some of the harder questions about cloud. So what we'd like for you to do is to think about the things that would say, well, here are the reasons why there's no way I would move into the cloud, or there's no way I would move into the cloud without the following questions being answered. And so if you think about it, some of those things start with just the basic history. Some of you probably don't believe that there's a big difference between the cloud and, for example, old-style hosting or application service providers, data center, remote data center hosting, et cetera. So, as you know, a lot of people think, and as do I, I'm one of those who just believe the cloud is just the next iteration of application hosting and cloud and data center, remote data center installations, and those kind of things. But there are a lot of people who believe it's a foundationally different, transformative type of technology. So we're going to hear a little bit about that today, and I want you to think about asking some really hard questions. I was thinking about giving a gift to somebody who can stump this panel here. So, you know, think about some questions that are so hard that you think can't be answered. There's going to be a couple of guys that are going to be trying to play that game for sure. What I wanted to start off with was the cloud negatives. And that is the very first thing that people think about when they hear cloud is all the security associated with it, privacy issues, you know, can I trust the cloud provider? Very kind of similar questions that we've seen in the past as well around application hosting and data center consolidations and those kind of things. But I want you guys to think about, and we're going to have the panel talk a lot about, first let's get the negatives out of the way. Because there's really a lot of things that people think about and just say, you know, there's no way that you could have HIPAA providers in the cloud. Untrue, right? There are a lot of myths around the fact that you know that PHI is not allowed to be stored in the cloud across state lines or things like that. Those are just not true, and it's a good thing to pop that open. And if you've got some specific questions around that, let's bring those up. The other thing that we're going to try to foster the discussion around, and I'd like for you to add to, is what are the real problems in the cloud? If they're not specifically around security, and there's security and things that we need to talk about, what about the issues of reliability? What about the issues of performance? What about the issues of cloud-to-cloud connections? So those are the kind of things to start thinking about questions around as well. Then, of course, what are the industries that are doing cloud so well or have moved further in the cloud than healthcare has, and what can we learn from them? For example, the federal government had a cloud-first policy out a couple of years ago, which means that they've been doing it. What are some of the lessons that they can learn, that we have learned from what the federal government is doing? For example, there is one specific initiative. If you haven't seen it before, it's good to look up and start to follow, especially if you're interested in following on the backs and behind the federal government, who has the same kind of regulatory and the same kind of performance and other burdens as we do in healthcare. So there's a framework called FedRAMP, the Risk Assessment Management Protocol. FedRAMP, what it does is, you know that the federal government is established around hundreds of agencies. There are 22 large departments. But right now, the way that security works in the federal government is, if you want to buy a piece of software from one company, you run through a security process, accreditation, and et cetera, all the policies, procedures necessary. And then you go to sell it to another agency, and they do it again. You do go to another agency and they do it again. Can you see the pattern? Over and over, the same security questions will be asked. All of the same work is repeated over and over again. There's a lot of money associated with that. Some of us on the government contractor side make a ton of cash because that happens, but not necessarily a good thing. So FedRAMP was designed so that if the federal government through GSA says, this cloud provider is secure. Here we've run all the policies, procedures, et cetera, around them. And now, if another agency wants to use them, they can use that as their basis of the documentation going forward, so they don't have to repeat all those steps again. That's called the FedRAMP process. Question would be, would we in healthcare be willing to say, if you've been FedRAMPed, quote unquote, by the federal government, does that mean you're good enough for us in healthcare as well? Important question. What can we lean on the federal side to be able to do that? There's a lot of predictions around the cloud. There's a lot of macro predictions, et cetera, going on. So we'll ask our esteemed panel here to talk about, where they see the industry going. And then lastly, we want to have you ask questions around real contracting, procurement, auditing, et cetera, issues. Once you boil down cloud from all of its hype and general discussions, et cetera, it's a contract between you and another service provider. What are the HIPAA engagements that you are willing to get into with those service providers? Are they business associates or not? What do those terms look like? How are you going to audit them? How are you going to verify that what they're doing is actually correct? After you've verified them in January, are you going to go check on them again later in the year? So those are the kind of things that if we, again, boil this down from just hype and say, okay, how do we get started? Many of those questions around how do I buy this? What are the contracts that I set up, et cetera, should start popping up. So that was just an introduction. I haven't answered any questions for you. I'm hoping those are starting to foster questions. We've got the panel here that are the real experts, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a second. My quick background is that I run a blog called healthcareguy.com. I'm an analyst for health IT as well as medtech, which are medical device vendors. We do a little bit of work in life sciences as well as a lot in federal government. So NIH, VA, OMB, these are all clients of ours. So because we have a nice wide variety of customers that we're dealing with, and they're all looking at how to move into the cloud, how to do this well, it's an area that we've got some expertise in. So I'm going to introduce the panel. We've got first Kurt, then Tony, and then Steve on the other end. I'm going to have Kurt start out with just a quick minute or two intro, and then we'll have him talk a little bit about his expertise in the cloud area. And hopefully by this time you guys have some questions. Otherwise, we have about 1,400 questions that'll go about 7 hours. So we're going to be doing cloud all day. Go for it, Kurt.
Hi, my name is Kurt Johnson. I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Corporate Development for Corian Corporation. And Corian, we provide software solutions to help organizations deal with a lot of the challenges of identity and access. And essentially, how do you ensure that the right people have the right access to the right resources in your organization and are doing the right things with it? So I sit up here from kind of the representative of the cloud security, specifically around that angle of protection of the information that may be sitting in the cloud. What are the audit implications, essentially dealing with who can get access to that? And if you want to know more about Corian, we actually have a table in the back, and I'll let my colleagues there kind of answer any specific questions. But one of the things, healthcare, kind of along with financial services, is neck and neck our largest industry. And we deal with a lot of healthcare providers around these whole issues of protecting their data and the identity and the access elements to it. And obviously cloud factors into that quite a bit. But one of the interesting characteristics is that we've seen healthcare lag behind almost every other industry in its movement to the cloud, at least from our customer base. And I don't think that means healthcare is more risk averse or doesn't like cloud, doesn't want to do cloud. I actually think it's more the opposite, in that a lot of the security awareness of cloud has created such a visibility within healthcare organizations that there's more of that partnership with the people. Because I can't tell you how many chief security officers I've talked to who said, I learned about our cloud deployment after the fact and now have to kind of clean up the mess from that. And given the sensitivity of the information we deal with within the healthcare space, hate to say it, but like retail organizations, even banks, they're limited on the liability of getting a cardholder data out there, and a customer and individuals almost become immune to it because they're capped on the liability. The bank itself or the merchant itself is. But with health records, if health information gets out there, there's no getting it back. There's no capping that liability. So around the cloud, the chief concerns really come about, should I be doing it? What should we be doing? And how do we protect it when we're being pushed in that direction from the business unit?
All right, so Tony's got a very cool title. He is Chief Cloudologist at NTT Data, and I think I'm going to start stealing that title if you don't mind. Go for it.
All right, my name is Tony Shan, and I'm from NTT Data. Maybe you heard of the company. We're actually number 7 in IT consulting in the world. We provide a variety of services from SOA, web, mobile, social computing, and also cloud. So my responsibility in the organization is leading the cloud advisory. Basically, we provide customers with high-end, very strategic road mapping advice. How do you view the opportunity? How do you see the risks? How do you mitigate these risks? And also we help clients to build a roadmap because cloud is very big effort in a variety of organizations. So you need to know, does it fit us? Where should we start? What kind of risk should we be aware of? What kind of pitfalls? So we provide this kind of service to help you to understand what the other people are doing, where the mainstream, what are the training stuff. And at the end of the day, we help you to build a very solid phased roadmap so you can take baby steps through the maturity growth, evolve your IT environment, and make your IT more profit efficient and effective.
Okay, and Steve comes from a small company. You may have heard of IBM. You heard him earlier in the day. Go for it.
Hey, thanks, Sheed. I'm Steve Weaver. I'm actually part of the IBM organization. I'm in our software group, specifically with Rational Brand. And we're the guys responsible for taking the business needs of an organization and converting those into reality in terms of your IT infrastructure and the applications that you run, both internally facing for your internal customers and also externally facing too. So we're all about software delivery. And one of the best things to happen to software delivery in many years is cloud, because as we move forward, especially in areas like healthcare, we're getting new requirements coming at us faster and faster and faster. The pace of innovation is really increasing. So if you're an organization that takes a year to get a new version of your software out to your customers, then you're going to fail in the marketplace. Especially today when we're seeing a lot of kind of the consumerization of IT, and by that I mean, you go into almost any organization today and you see people interacting with their IT systems via smartphones or via iPads and tablets. The pace of change is incredible, and your consumers, your customers, are expecting to see updates to applications almost on a weekly or daily basis. And there's no way traditional IT can kind of keep up with that pace. So cloud really gives us an opportunity to provide what we're starting to call continuous delivery. To be constantly developing or designing, developing, testing, and moving into production all of these critical IT systems. I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when we talked about enterprise modernization. But cloud now is part of that equation when you start to say, okay, this is the direction we need to go in, and how do we get there? And part of that answer may be migrating some applications to the cloud, providing access through the cloud to some of your data. Whether that's in a public cloud setting where the data resides with a third-party host, or whether that's in a private cloud setting where your data still resides inside of your data center but is accessible to your internal customers. So that's what we're all about, is leveraging the cloud really to transform the process of delivering software into an organization.
Great. So one thing to realize about the panel is that you have experts here in cloud across multiple industries, but each of them has healthcare experience. Corian, for example, does about half of their business in healthcare. IBM, of course, a huge business in healthcare as well, with the Watson project you guys just heard talked about earlier in the day. Tony also serves both healthcare as well as non-healthcare clients. So do ask, some of your questions might be around how do we apply things from other industries into here. So those are definitely worth asking. So I'd like to start off, and again, if you have any questions, just keep lining up. We'll take them as you have them. So what I'd like to start off with is the first question around security, and that is, anytime we talk about cloud and healthcare, that's always the first question that comes up. So I'd like for each of the panelists to take just that question and say, what are the problems and what are the myths associated with security and healthcare and taking healthcare, PHI, et cetera, into the cloud? What allowed some of the clients that you are working with, again, specifically in healthcare, to make that switch over and say, okay, I trust it now? What was that switch over that they did that allowed them to say, okay, I understand security in the cloud, and here's why I'm doing it?
So I'll take a first crack at that. I think if you look at kind of the whole issue of cloud security, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Verizon Data Breach Report. That is a very comprehensive survey and research done into data breaches and the sources of them, the impact of them, the varieties of them, et cetera. This year's just actually came out last week, I believe, but last year's report had an interesting comment around cloud security. And what they said was, we are often asked whether the breaches we investigate are due to issues around the cloud. And they said the easy answer is no, not really. It's not the technologies inherent in the cloud that make it any more or less secure. And in most cases, it is more secure than a lot of what we've been doing back on premise. The issue is more about the lack of control of giving up your data and information to somebody else, giving that up without having the comprehensive set of controls and understanding and management around it. And I think that is the biggest issue as it relates to cloud security. What controls are in place to mitigate anything that might occur when somebody who isn't our employee has access to our information, is managing different things around that? And many of the large cloud providers believe security is a proprietary thing, and they won't share details about how they're securing that information. They won't give you the ability of going on site and looking and touching and seeing what's happening. And we see reports on things such as, 6 or 7 Google administrators were fired for reading Gmail of people because they could, because they were administrators who had full access to all of those things. And these were just creepy guys looking at teenage girl emails and having jokes back and forth about that. But what if that's physician-patient communication or physician-to-physician communication where we've got administrators? So that big open question is, what are we doing to manage those controls? And how can we put policies and procedures in place and monitoring capabilities so we know who has access to some of our more important information? Where is that information physically sitting, and what can we do to essentially protect that in a more effective way?
So we have one question from the audience, so we'll take that, and then we'll let Tony and Steve answer the other question as well.
This is my name is Jack Langworthy. I'm with Covington Associates. This is a more fundamental question from an end user perspective. If I'm an office-based physician and a vendor comes to me and said, look, I've got a cloud solution, and what that means to you is you get a monthly bill and you get a URL that you can access the portal and access the applications. What difference and what value is it to that end user to have a pure cloud solution which may reside on AWS or WebSphere and maybe Silverlight 3 versus something that's just the vendor provides a hosted solution behind a firewall? Is there any real value to the end user to really understand the plumbing or to get access to a, quote, cloud solution versus a hosted solution?
Okay, great question. Does somebody want to take that, or I can handle it as well?
All right, good question. I think the key is the difference between cloud solution and the traditional hosted solution. I think there are several key differences. One is traditional hosted solution basically offload your IT hosting. In other words, you don't need to run your web server, app server, or backup all these things. You can offload, outsource this to dedicated people who knows how to deal with how to. Now the challenge is this is sort of one type of move. You move to, let's see, whatever the vendors they do this. You say, okay, you host my application web server. I pay you the monthly fee, and then you take care of everything. The challenge here is there are several things. One is it does not scale. Whatever you procured, you said, okay, I need 5 servers, whatever the same storage, whatever network deal, it's all finite. It's a set. You actually need to deal with capacity planning. Let's say your volume grows, you need to prepare. In case your business is not so well, economy goes down, you cannot throw them away. It's your stuff. You have to maintain it. Other people maintain for you, you own these things. Whereas cloud solution really provides you the commodity. It's commoditized the solution where you can subscribe. You don't need to own anything. You just, like you said, some vendor comes to the door and say, okay, hey, you don't need to own this. I have an application, I do this, I do. You basically like you subscribe a cell phone or power company. I can disconnect at any time. I don't want this, or I'm not happy with this, I go another one. So that's the freedom for you to choose rather than just get one thing with the hosting solution. The other type is, there's a significant difference is called the metering solution. Basically, if it's a cloud solution, we pay as we go. In other words, you meet the usage, just like my cell phone. If I call more this month, I pay more. Next month, whatever my plan is, I pay that. Same as electricity. So that type of things is key in cloud solution. It's not like hosting. Hosting, whatever you do, you deal with it. So there's some other differences between the hosting and the cloud solution. To me, cloud is evolution for that one. We're based on that one, right? But it provides you the freedom, on-demand computing, scalability, metering, and also you have freedom to go. It's not like you got stuck with the host. You can choose different vendors based on your SLA, based on your financial terms, based on your risk taking.
I think what Tony's saying is really the key there. Cloud is all about self-service capability. It's about pay-as-you-go. But if I asked everybody in this room what is cloud, I think I'd probably get 100 different answers, right? So it's almost like cloud is whatever you want it to be. But typically when we think about cloud solutions, we talk about 3 different things. We talk about virtualization, talk about automation, and kind of talk about standardization. And if you think about each one of those, virtualization is really taking, or disassociating your application, your system from the physical infrastructure, right? It's the ability to run multiple virtual machines on a server. And if you think about that, we've been doing cloud for 40 years. Also, when we talk about logical partitions on mainframes, for example. So that's really not new. What is new is this concept of being able to automate the process and manage the process of deploying those virtual machines, those virtual servers, those virtual systems in a kind of a self-service, kind of pay-as-you-go sort of way, and then standardizing your IT infrastructure on a set of services and integrating those services. So when you ask the question, if I see a web interface, is that cloud? From the end user perspective, it really doesn't matter, whether it's cloud or whether it's a server back there. What's really the key about it is the way we have the elasticity, we have the scalability to be able to address changing business needs in a very agile and a very rapid kind of a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think to build on that, I think that's exactly what some of the quote unquote newer kind of cloud environments enable. Because I agree, from an end user standpoint, even if it's premise versus hosted versus cloud, for them there isn't that much difference. It really gets to what it takes on that what's usually a smaller office that doesn't have IT staff and personnel and expertise to leverage that of their provider. But it's important that they understand what is that underlying infrastructure. I mean, virtualization has great ability to do things such like adjusting to workloads. If you've got certain hours you need peak usage, you don't have to build an infrastructure that has all of that. You can just take advantage of that on a temporary basis. But it really gets to understanding, well, where is my information? Is that co-located with others in a multi-tenant environment? Is it a private aspect to that? So And each of those different things comes with different costs. So it really is up to the organization on where they're going to make that balance on what they get in increased flexibility and manageability versus some of the controls that will come at additional cost to keep some of their things separate within those environments.
And for a lot of organizations, I think it's a little bit of both. It's both on-premise clouds plus some aspect of public cloud. So you can envision a situation where you're running an application or information in your local data center, but at some point there are peaks and troughs of the amount of data that's flowing. So you may fail over or leverage the public cloud to supply some of that elasticity and scalability if you don't have the resources in your local data center. So it's not all about third-party hosted clouds. It's about clouds in your private data center too, public clouds and the hybrid between the two.
Great. So we're going to go ahead and take the next question.
Hi, this is Dave Lynn with Allina Hospitals and Clinics in Minneapolis. My question is around security. When you understand the technical infrastructures that are built to support today's cloud-based services, these highly virtualized systems, and the example that you just used earlier about system administrators having access to all the data, you also have system software now that has accessibility to do certain things to manipulate that data, dedupe, for example. My question is really, are you starting to see the cloud service providers write indemnification clauses that would protect us if we put data in the cloud that then is breached at some level, either inadvertently by some system software or by the case of the Google administrators? Are you starting to see that flexibility now where you get indemnification clauses written into contracts? Because that would protect me. I understand the economics, the flexibility, the hybrid nature of delivering the data. In many cases, it becomes the flexibility and the economics of using the cloud versus using my own private cloud. But I've yet to see, at least locally in our market, cloud providers willing to write the kind of indemnification clauses we need in the contracts.
Yeah, and so let me elaborate the question just slightly again, is that in the healthcare side, from the HIPAA perspective, you have two blocks. You have a covered entity and a business associate. Were you thinking about it from the covered entity perspective or the business associate perspective? Covered entity, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a extremely important element in dealing with the negotiation and choosing of your cloud providers. And if you go look at the big guys, not to pick on anyone in particular, but Amazon, go online, check out Amazon Cloud Services contract and just look under warranty. And you will see in big bold print there that Amazon does not warrant that the information will be available, protected, free from being stolen. And essentially what they'll give you, if that happens, is a credit on your monthly fee. They are absolutely not stepping up to take on any of those kind of things. And I think that's an incredibly important consideration and concern that people have. Some of the smaller players, more mobile players that work more in partnership with you, but also tend to be on how they construct those things, will take on certain aspects of that. But the indemnification is something that their lawyers are pushing very, very hard to stay away from. And I think it's incredibly important to understand what is available to you. The other piece too is when you decide to terminate your contract or non-renew. In most cases, you have 30 days to get all of your data back, and many organizations don't even have the physical or the technical capability of pulling all that information and storing it, and after that, it's just gone. And so I think this is why for heads of security, the best friends you can make are with your accounts payable and your legal people to understand when these things are coming down at that point, to have a voice in it, and not necessarily being there after the fact to figure out how to deal with it. Because this is probably the most immature aspect of it, is the providers really taking and standing behind kind of what they're willing to do there.
And one quick note on, so a specific answer is there are firms willing to indemnify when you ask them to be when you ask them to sign a BAA. Right? So if you're going to a vendor, and like Amazon will just refuse to sign the BAA, so there's no question there. Some vendors are signing BAAs, but not willing to indemnify. Others are definitely signing BAAs as well as working, just like Kurt said, to negotiate with you. And really, so that's basically what it boils down to. So some of us have existing contracts that we've used for other clients. So if you'd like to see them, we're happy to share them with you as to here's the kind of language you can actually put into an RFI or an RFP, so that when you're going out looking for these vendors, ask them to answer those questions specifically. The simple answer to your question is yes, some are doing it. The more difficult answer is that the big boys are not only not doing it, I don't think they will. Just as a quick example, what they did with the federal government was when the Cloud First policy came out, they had this kind of language that Kurt is talking about on the federal contracts. Clearly that was not acceptable for the federal government. I mean, they basically gave this kind of SLA. So the federal government, with its size, of course, was able to ask for changes in those terms, et cetera. I guess it basically boils down to, I'm not sure how big your provider is, but I mean, if as an organization you're big enough and you have companies, for just one example is a company called Firehost. So Firehost is focusing on HIPAA compliance as one of their core tenets for their cloud services. So they're more willing to be malleable. Companies like Rackspace, which will do specific kinds of, very specific kinds of contracts for different kinds of organizations, are probably more flexible in those areas. So the good news is they're definitely doing it. The bad news is not everybody. It's still a small group. Other questions? Should we continue? Did you guys want to add anything on this issue? Okay. Steve, what I'd like to ask you to do a little bit is talk about some of the customers that you have worked with specifically in healthcare. What were some of the challenges that they started talking to you about, in which after they went into the cloud, it was less of an issue? Like, a lot of them will talk about security or reliability or et cetera, but once they get it, once they jump in and are starting to use it, what are kind of some of the things that you think that they don't have a big problem with?
Right. So I think a couple of security is obviously key. We work a lot as well with large hospital systems or providers who are writing their own systems, or who have, through acquisitions, have grown their IT departments to include multiple, as I was mentioning earlier, multiple claims processing systems, multiple other systems that they need to consolidate. So the cloud is very attractive for that in consolidating and migrating their applications onto the cloud. As new requirements come through, we mentioned this morning about ICD-10, for example, requiring new regulatory compliance, new kind of guidelines as they build in the systems. I think it's important to take a step back and take a look at all of the systems in an IT organization and identify those which make sense to move to the cloud. So there are a number of hospital systems that we're working with, for example, who have built out private cloud infrastructures to provide this kind of self-service aspect of cloud computing to their internal customers. And one of the things that they are able to do, because they have this ability to rapidly provision new systems and new solutions, is they are picking up the pace that they're doing development and software delivery. So with this idea of continuous delivery, the ability with the cloud to almost treat your infrastructure as code. In the past, if you had to stand up a new system, you had to acquire the hardware, you had to lay down the operating system, you had to install the middleware and configure it, you had to deploy the application and configure it. And this could take many months to do. With the ability to create virtualized systems in the cloud, you can take the script, if you like, for deploying these complex systems that include operating system, middleware, and application, and automate that whole process. So I think one of the statistics that I like to share with people is that of all the bugs that you see in applications out in production, 30% are caused by manual configuration errors. So if you can automate the process of of deploying complex systems in the cloud, then you can increase the quality and the reliability of your systems. So we're working with a hospital system that's been able to cut down the length of time it takes to deploy applications into production from 3 weeks to 90 minutes. And this is a huge capability when we're talking about implementing new regulation changes, implementing new systems, consolidating systems. The ability to do your development, to do your testing, and to do your production all in the cloud, all on the identical infrastructure is really key, and we're starting to get this idea of continuous delivery where you can almost deploy updates to your system every day if you want to get that granular. Now, a lot of customers aren't obviously getting that granular, but the possibility is there, and that's going to, I think, change the face of the way we do software delivery in healthcare and other industries.
So, Tony, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about, given the customers that you're working with in healthcare, how much involvement or problems do you see with software providers getting in the way of either cloud implementations or assisting with cloud implementations? Do you need to have, I mean, like a lot of hospitals have, and I love the term from this morning, cherished systems, which, if you didn't hear it, was legacy systems from this morning. Legacy systems providers, if you're trying to move to the cloud, can they prevent you from doing so? What have you seen as far as, and the other two panelists definitely jump in, is can the existing legacy providers stop you from moving to the cloud or make it much harder? Or is it, with virtualization and other technologies, is it pretty straightforward?
Yeah, I've been through some hospital systems and working with different clients. And in my view, most of these systems are pretty proprietary. As a matter of fact, I talked to some of these vendors trying to see, how do we make it a little bit open? Because, not only they close the system, they don't even show the data schema or they show the API, which allows you to some integration. So that's the reality in healthcare. I think by nature, lots of these systems just built for specific functions, and the hospital physicians just buy them, put it there, and when they need another thing, buy another thing, put all this in an IT environment with very heterogeneous outcome. So from cloud, I would say cloudification perspective, it is a big barrier because with this kind of proprietary formats, and without the very standard interoperability, it's really hard to get them connected and let alone move to the cloud. So the challenge here is, one is, I think I work on both sides, from provider side and as well as the consumer side. So as a consumer, we have to push, right? Because we buy this equipment, software, hardware from the vendors. We have to push these vendors, make them open, make them move towards service orientation, move towards cloud-based solution, enforce interoperability, portability. In that way, those vendors were moved to open this system to allow you to access the data, use the data, mine the data. I always, talk to the people, like if you go to hospital, right? If I go to the ER, they ask me filling 10 pages, the form. And for something I never remember, not only ask me, ask my wife, my kid, my parent, grandparent, all these things. How can I remember all these things, they went through? And then, okay, after the physician checked with me, say, oh, you go to X-ray, take X-ray. I go there, they ask me to fill in another 5 pages. So all these things happen in today's environment. This is just because the reality in the healthcare system is not interoperable. And by the way, whatever you're filling, and probably you guys are familiar with, these are entered by nurses. And I have a statistic, the error when they enter this, and this is actually your history of a treatment or medication, all this stuff enter the system. Doctors see this and treat you. And there's a big error rate by doing that. So I think automation, make it more open, eliminated the proprietary formats will really drive this industry to move to the next mature level. So from my organization, NTT Data, we do lots of these things called the basically Cloud Jumpstart program. So in other words, when we see this thing, where cloud can help us, right? We know the reality. It's a very proprietary. There are a lot of challenges, a lot of barriers from provider side. So as a service provider from healthcare perspective, as a user for the system, how do we move these things? We actually help lots of hospital systems to assess their current environment, basically work a current state evaluation. So what are the barriers, what are the shortcomings, what are the blind spots you have, and with that, we set a very good strategy, we call a strategization process, to help us understand that with this maturity, with my next level, what kind of key things should I worry about, where are the low-hanging fruits? And by that, we can define entry point. So we do this. Let's say, okay, look at the patient system, look at the insurance system, look at the patient discharge system, let's isolate these things and break this down to see how I can improve this, whether it's a risk, whether it's a privacy, as the gentleman mentioned, whether it's interoperability between the physician or shared information between hospital system. Today it's not doable. So I think it's a big challenge. A cloud really, I would say, is catalyze that kind of movement, because with cloud we can make this move. We can eliminate these kind of barriers. It has been there for years, and some other vendors just resist this kind of change. They keep this proprietary for their reason. So for us as a community, we can move these things, introduce a cloud, make it more open, make it more standard, interoperable. Plus the cloud to me is commoditize a lot of things. You don't need to own it. To me, it's hardware free, software free at the end, right? Like you mentioned, I don't need to own anything. I want to use something, like I want to use electricity. I never mind where is it from, who generated this. I only need the rate, how much I use, I pay it. So IT will be in that paradigm, software free, hardware free. We just need to know who provides the service. There's a check, I can see the credibility, and as Kurt mentioned, look at the AMS, the SLA, I joked with them. And if you look at Microsoft, the same thing, these big players, SLA, service level agreement, nothing's there. So we, as a consumer, as a community, will move that one. When they will move to the, to the maturity level, everybody can enjoy the cloud benefits.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. If there's any other questions, please do come up. So go ahead.
My name is Ebenezer Buodi, and I'm with healthcare. I'm working for the state. And I have a question to address what Tony said. In healthcare, I hope my accent you can understand me. And with healthcare, cost is very important to us. And talking about cloud, public cloud, is usage based, the cost. So as Tony said, it's like electricity. You use it and then you pay for it. Now I wrote my question here. How could the organization effectively limit its usage so that cost will not spiral out of control, and yet at the same time to preserve efficiency and effectiveness? That's my first question. Now the second question is, if indeed money is a problem, does an organization need to have both private and public cloud? Besides speed and agility, what are the disadvantages? The disadvantages or advantages, or should I say benefit and lack of it?
Okay, so I'm going to formulate the question, just repeat it for everybody. One, how do you make sure that especially when you have elastic price control, how do you make sure that the costs don't spiral out of control past your budget, et cetera? And for those, again, I'll mention the federal government, again, has been looking at this problem the same way, because they have fixed budgets and you have to be able to work within those budgets. So when you go back, and I'll have the panel jump in here in a second, when you go back, take a look at some of the searches on Google around how the federal government is doing budgeting for cloud computing. Those budgets are typically fixed, and the vendor sometimes takes the burden of saying, I'll provide any extra services, but I'm going to fit it into this box. So that was one part of the question. The second part of the question was, and whichever one of you can take the cost one, and then the second part of the question was public versus private cloud. Why not just start in private, I believe is what the question was. Who wants the cost one first?
I'll take a stab at it. I think it really starts going into an endeavor like this with a good understanding of what your current cost structures are, where are those coming from, so you can do a good sense of those comparisons. Through good monitoring, managing, and analysis, you generally get a pretty good sense on what your computing requirements are that gets into the negotiations with your cloud provider on the level of computing you need. And as I mentioned before, many of them are actually have strong benefits that if you have peak. So for example, say you've got certain times of the year or time of the day where you've got peak usage. If you were doing that yourselves, you would have to plan for that peak usage and build up an infrastructure to manage that, even though your general computing would be way down here on the other 90% of the time. Many of the cloud providers offer that strong advantage that as you do that, you can just take that for the 2 hours that you need it in a given month or whatever it might be. So because of that, that's where you could really get into the understanding, and through the negotiations and the contracts, you could build in caps. There's the metering capability, so you can sit and monitor and manage that on an ongoing basis. And if you see things that are just out of whack with what you expected, to go back and forth with your provider to truly understand that, but build enough protection in there up front that you're not getting surprised on that. Many times through that, in what would take an infrastructure and headcount, you do see those significant cost advantages. We were dealing with one hospital where the chief security officer was pushing back, saying they wanted to move to Office 365 in this specific case. And they actually did an assessment to realize they were going to save $10 million a year by migrating to this cloud solution. But the security person wasn't comfortable with it and pushing back. And the CFO kind of grabbed him at the sidebar break during the meeting and said, listen, I don't think you understood. We're saving $10 million here. I don't care if it costs you $2 million to secure this darn thing. That still saves me $8 million a year. You figure out what it's going to cost. We can help manage that, and we'll get that into the process. So it was so driven by cost that, you know, some of the things like the security became, you just figure it out because we're going to be saving so much. So, you know, long answer really gets down to understand what your current costs are, understand what the cost benefit are going to be, and then from there you'll get a very good sense of what your computing needs are to build that into your cost structures on what that cloud provider can be and what it would take when you add more virtual images and things like that. So you generally get very good economics, and they, believe me, they're going to do a good job helping sell the return on investment, so you can get a good understanding of where there's going to be benefits and where there's cost surprises that may not be thought of. And I guess I'll transition that to the other, because that's the private versus public, that there might even be differences in that based on, you know, which route you take.
So we're right now 1 minute over. Is it okay if we take this last question? Sure. Okay, so we'll end with this question on public versus private.
Yeah, I think a good question. I actually, in a recent project I went through, provide very strategic advice and also planning for a big service provider in healthcare domain. Literally, we call it bend the cost curve. The cost always go this way. We want to bend it, and that's related to, you know, what you're talking about. I think I'm going to share with you, because we provide probably like 50 points. What should we do? Deal with the cost plus the other pieces, right? The risks, the other things. I'll share with you some of the things. The first thing is in the IT healthcare IT system, we try to identify the redundancy, duplication, and the waste, and also automate this. A lot of pieces you can start with business process in healthcare system. Lots of things, the menu process, redundant entry, error handling, all these things. You can start with that. That will cut significantly your overall cost with the IT support, with the business operation. Secondly is about the, one of the benefits I want to mention, cloud, is CapEx versus OpEx. In other words, if you want to, right now, we load, what the cloud brings, a low entry point. You can have the systems HP has today, Dell has today, instantly, because you just need how many rooms, what kind of, that can significantly lower the capital X if you need that capacity. Of course, you need to worry about OpEx. We balance these things, because in hospital, we don't need to buy everything. If we need something for a short period of time, or depending on your workload, you can identify some patterns. Then adjust or redesign your IT infrastructure, particularly at the infrastructure level. I'm talking infrastructure as a service, to see how can I save money rather than owning this equipment, rather procure these things all together. Cloud provides you the flexibility and the sync provisioning, resource pooling, sharing, all these things can significantly reduce the cost in your IT. The last question, talk about the private and the public cloud. To me, the best approach is hybrid. If you haven't started anything, I would say take a look at your private cloud approach, because look at your environment. Private cloud can, because it does not change a lot of things inside your firewall. It's all under your control. You can do a lot of things to start with. On the other hand, look at the public cloud, because public cloud to me is the commoditized service with very, very low cost. But of course, there's security concerns, there's risk concerns, there's service level agreement concerns, right? Where the balance is. So like the project I went through, I talk about its hybrid approach. You know, you see what kind of data I cannot move out. It's sensitive data, I got to have privacy, I got to have compliance, put in your private cloud. What about your backup? You don't need to back up all your data, right? And put it in different sites and ship the tapes from. How about putting in a private cloud? Of course, you can encrypt it, but with PKI, public key infrastructure, you can encrypt it. Even put AWS, you don't have anything. nobody can break it. So have this kind of hybrid approach would fit you the best. Of course, you look at the cost, risk, and other compliance, all these factors together, you will build a very solid roadmap. How do you migrate to the cloud?
All right, so wanted to thank the panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. And of course, we are around afterwards, so try to set a break if you have any other questions. Most of us have done this for a while, and we do have materials that we could probably send to you if you need some examples or language, et cetera, to put into your contracts. Thanks again.